Much for joining the Southwest Center for Human Relations Studies at the University of Oklahoma for the 2020-2021 season of our monthly webinar series. I am Dr. Jenny Rongo. I'm the Executive Director of the Southwest Center and Director of NCORE, and I'm delighted to be your host today. Our hope is that we continue the conference's tradition of working to improve racial and ethnic relations on college campuses by providing virtual learning opportunities. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, NCORE offers 2 webinars per month. On the first and last Wednesdays, our Emerging Scholars webinars are held on the first Wednesday, and they focus on ideas that speak directly to the experiences of students. These webinars are either facilitated or co-facilitated by a student and are intended to identify emerging scholars. These are always available at no cost. Our next student webinar will be presented on October 7th by doctoral candidate Jennifer Batchelder from Florida State University. Jennifer will explore a different approach to developing leadership in the Latinx student population. Our season scholar webinars are held on the last Wednesday of every month, with the exceptions of December, and they are offered at a cost of $25. On September 30th, Dr. Claire Valderrama Wallace from California State University, East Bay, will discuss how the COVID pandemic has exacerbated centuries in the making health inequities, demanding that educators, administrators, and staff in nursing education reckon with racism, colonialism, and neoliberalism that shape how health is conceptualized. Please visit our website, www.ancore.ou.edu, for the full list of featured webinars this season. Make sure you're live posting. We want to know where you're watching us from. Tweet, Instagram, Facebook your pictures from your office with the hashtag NCORE. Start the conversation online. This is the way we can stay connected in a time where connection is so important. Today we have Jeze Lopez, Briseida Maciel, Davianna Moran, and Richard Chavez from Mount San Antonio College. The panel will explore how adverse childhood experiences make an impact in the lives of foster youth, how that is represented during their college experience, and the unintentional barriers often created by our institutions. The center is grateful for their expertise. Please help me in welcoming our panelists. Jeze?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Rungus. Thank you for the opportunity for us to be here and present. My name is, I said Jeze Lopez. Jeze Lopez. I am the program director for the REACH Foster Youth Program at Mount San Antonio College, and welcome to our presentation, The Real Story, a program for foster youth by foster youth. We are located in the city of Walnut in the state of California in Los Angeles County. We're about 26 miles away from the city of Los Angeles. At my time at Mount SAC for the last 5 years, I have been part of the REACH Foster Youth Program. And before that, I worked as a program manager for a transitional housing program for foster youth. I do want to, full disclosure, I am not a former foster youth. I have no lived experience. My experience working with foster youth comes from my professional time. I want to now, give the space for my colleagues to introduce themselves as well.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the presentation today. My name is Briseida Maciel, and I work for the REACH program as a life skills specialist. I have been with REACH now for a little over 2 years. However, in the past, I have worked in various student support programs assisting current and former foster youth, as well as other at-risk student populations at both private and public higher ed institutions. I am also someone who identifies with having had lived experiences in the foster care system. Welcome to our presentation today.
Hello, my name is Davianna. I'm currently in the extended foster care. I'm a third year at Mount SAC, majoring in psychology, and I also work at the REACH department as a student ambassador.
Hello, my name is Chavez. I'm a former student. I'm a second year in my class studying to get a degree in electrical engineering. And I am also work at REACH as a student ambassador.
And Richard, just we're having a little bit of troubles listening with your audio. So if you can, maybe get a little bit closer or tweak something, we might, just to make sure everything's a little more clear. And so.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So we asked that please save any questions for the chat box, or at the end we will be having a space for questions and answers. Now, fostering inclusion at NCORE, it is the expectation of the Southwest Center of Human Relations Studies that all participants at NCORE webinars enjoy a welcoming and inclusive environment, free from all forms of discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. NCORE is committed to fostering an atmosphere that encourages the expression and exchange of ideas in pursuit of the ideal. NCORE is committed to the promotion of equality of opportunity and treatment for all NCORE participants in NCORE-sponsored events, regardless of gender, gender identity or expression, race, color, national or ethnic origin, religion or religious belief, age, marital status, sexual orientation, immigration status, disabilities, veteran status, or body size. Now, we also want to give a land acknowledgement for the land where our campus sits on. This land on which we inhabit is physically situated in the original ancestral homelands of the Gabrielino Tongva. We pay respect to the Tongva and the Keys people, past, present, and future, and their continuing presence in the homeland and throughout their historical diaspora. Now today, for our presentation, these are some of the things that we want to touch upon. We want to make sure that we showcase a little bit of the improving educational outcomes motions that are being set in place, specifically in our state and in our institutions. We want to share a little bit of the trends and statistics concerning our foster youth and different placements that they come from, before attending our higher education. We want to go into the A study and explaining not just the study itself, but the impact that it does to our students in our campus environment and in their later life. I explained a little bit of the institutional barriers that sometimes our campuses create, unintentional, but barriers nonetheless. And then share a little bit of what REACH has done to create foster-friendly programming. Now, we do want to make sure that we point out that there has definitely been an increase of dedicated support programs for foster youth in California, both at the 4-year private and public, and at community colleges, which is what Mount SAC is. If you look at the graph, in 2008, we had 12 institutions of community colleges that had a foster youth support program, and 19 4-years that had it. 10 years later, that jumped to 89 and 36. That is quite considerable in such a short time per se. 116 community colleges also have what's called a foster youth success liaison, which is someone that is dedicated to be part of a team or a single person at times to support foster youth on their campus. Now, in 2011, there was AB 194 that provided priority registration for foster youth at community colleges and Cal States, and it suggested that University of California universities and private institutions also provided that prior to registration to foster youth. So great efforts haven't been made. However, we want to point out that we are getting closer, but still not there. I think it's important to celebrate whenever a new process, guideline, or law is enacted, but I think the true celebration should happen when the correct implementation of that is actually in place. So to give an example, the Foster Youth Success Liaison Initiative was a great initiative that provided one person in each campus at a community college to be recognized as that liaison for foster youth. However, that initiative did not provide any funding for community colleges to hire a full-time person dedicated to that, which that meant that someone that was already on college having a specific job, whether it's working for full-time for EOPS or EOP, working full-time for financial aid, admissions and records, got an additional task added onto their plate. Now, while this is a great initiative in theory, it also brings limitations to what one person can do if they already have another assignment, on top of what they're trying to do. Now, we do want to showcase a little bit of what has happened for us. In 2015, our REACH program was created. It is one thing that we have very clear at REACH is the great support that we have from our institution and from our administration. I think our Vice President of Student Services recognize the important role that community colleges can play when servicing foster youth. We are an open campus, accepting everyone that applies. We have a variety of resources available to support students, and we're quite forgiving. There's always a process for us to be able to support a student or find an appeal or do anything that can make sure that we keep them in the higher education system. So given, in 2015 that we did not have a foster youth program, they decided not only to create a position, but to create a program around it, funding 2 full-time positions, giving additional funding for discretionary funds to provide textbooks, to provide supplies, to provide support for peer mentoring, and that continuing effort that has continued throughout the 5 years that we existed. So much that in the beginning, the lead person for the program was a coordinator, and a position that a year ago was turned into a director. Definitely moving to institutionalize the REACH Foster Youth Program. So we want to make sure that we recognize that we are very blessed and lucky compared to other institutions, and we want to recognize our higher administration for taking the lead and doing all of that.
So moving on, we're going to go ahead into discussing trends and statistics, as we want to give everyone here today an overview of the foster care system, as well as important background information regarding the foster youth student population we tend to work with at our community college, now virtually, but so now moving on. So the foster care system is a temporary living arrangement for children and youth under the age of 18 who have been placed under the care of the state. According to the most recent AFCARS report, which is a preliminary report released every year for the previous year, in 2019, there were 423,997 youth in the foster care system. Now, there are multiple reasons why children and youth are removed from their homes, such as maltreatment, sexual abuse, parental drug abuse, among others. But the study that was brought out highlighted that the #1 reason was due to neglect. It's important to also highlight that not all youth who are placed in foster care are placed in a foster home. Following the removal from their families, some of them may experience multiple different housing placements. And so by looking at the graph on our screen, we can see that 46% of them are placed in a foster family home with non-relatives, meaning they're placed with complete strangers who they have never met before. Following, we have 32% who are placed in a foster family homes with relatives, meaning it could be extended family that perhaps they do or do not know. We could also see that there are several different types of housing placements, with 6% being placed in an institution type. We also have 5% at trial homes, and so on and so forth. This goes to show how every foster youth student we come across with has a unique and different background within the foster care system. The study also reported that on average, there are youth spend 19.6 months in care before they get to see a resolution in their case. That's almost 2 years living in some type of temporary housing arrangement, not knowing whether they get to go back home or not. Obviously, the #1 goal is to reunify them with their families. However, for those who permanently stay in care, do tend to experience multiple home changes. They tend to attend different high schools throughout that period, and overall just experience a lack of stability in their lives. And now it's important to consider all this, because all of this can set them at an academic disadvantage even before they start attending our higher ed institutions. Okay, so moving on now, now that I went over and discussed a little bit about the lived experiences of foster youth students, I want to focus some time on discussing a very, very important study that informs us a little bit more about our foster youth programming. The Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, otherwise referred to as the ACE study, was a collaboration done between the CDC and Kaiser Permanente's Health Appraisal Clinic back in the late 1990s. It is one of the largest studies ever conducted that directly links the relationship between adverse childhood experiences or childhood trauma and later life effects, such as health and social issue problems. Now, researchers interviewed a little over 17,000 HMO members who underwent a comprehensive physical examination and who chose to also provide detailed information regarding their childhood experience in areas of abuse, neglect, and family dysfunction. Part of the participants' demographic consisted mainly of mostly white, middle and upper middle income class who were college educated. And so all of them belong to the Kaiser Permanente's Health Appraisal Organization. And so after the study, what they found was that an astonishing 2/3, or about 66% of the participants, have reported experiencing at least one ACE. And then also one in six participants experience having had 4 or more ACEs. Some of those ACEs, as we can see on the screen, were in regards to experiencing physical and emotional abuse, as well as neglect, and some type of household dysfunction, such as mental illness, having an incarcerated relative, having someone in your family who had substance abuse, and so on. Now, another important thing that the study concluded was that the higher the amount of ACEs, the greater the risk of developing certain health effects as adults. And since the study was conducted again back in the 1990s, there has been numerous research done looking at how ACE disproportionately impacts our communities of color, as well as our low-income folks, which is also a demographic that our foster youth population tend to come from. Oh, awesome. So knowing your score. Before we dive into discussing what are some of the later life effects that folks who experience adverse childhood experiences are, we want to provide a space for you all to get to know your ACE score. So in the link, in the comment box, there's going to be a link provided that you can click on and follow, and you'll be briefly redirected. Or you can also scan the QR code we provided on the screen with your camera phone. Essentially, it's going to take you to a 10-question questionnaire that is very similar to the one used for the ACE study. But before you do so, I do want to mention that some of the questions can be triggering, so feel free not to participate. It's also anonymous, so we're going to go ahead and provide maybe 2 to 3 minutes, Jeze, for those of you who are interested in taking the quiz to do so, and then we'll go ahead and meet right back in here.
Okay, so whomever feels comfortable to share, if we can maybe ask you, please text Maciel 330 to 37607. It will give you the option then to cast your vote depending on the score that we have. So 0 for A for 0, B for 1, C for 2, D for 3, and E for 4 or more.
Yeah, so we want to do this follow-up activity just to kind of have an overview and some insight as to what is maybe perhaps the average ACE score within the audience. Feel free to share if you're comfortable.
So as we can see them populate, we can see the diversity within, everyone here on this webinar, ranging from 1, all the way to 4 or more. As of now, we actually have not had a single person say that they did not experience an ACE.
Awesome. So it's kind of, also very astonishing to see that within our audience, we have folks who have experienced 4 or more ACEs at 50%. Oh.
And I think that's a demonstration of the resiliency factor that so many people have. Obviously to experience these adverse, situations as a child and then, growing up. So I think as you all saw the questions, they're, quite intense, quite invasive. And so imagine those are some of the situations that our students have encountered before coming to us and before coming to higher education.
So we can move on. Thank you. So now we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the long-term and later life effects that folks who have experienced adverse childhood experiences, hence, traumatic trauma. We're going to go ahead and go over and see what they look like. So on this slide, on the picture right here, we can see that folks later on can tend to develop more serious injuries, such as traumatic brain injuries, fractures, and bumps. We can also see some mental health related challenges, such as experiencing depression, anxiety, suicide, some PTSD. We also see the unintended pregnancy, pregnancy complications, and fatal death. Folks are also probably more likely to engage in risky behaviors in referring to using alcohol and drug and substance abuse and being involved in unprotected sex. We could also see a development in chronic diseases such as cancer, diabetes, obesity, and heart disease. And then also one of the ones that catches our attention the most would be the opportunities in regards to education, occupation, and income. Now, how are ACE related back to our foster youth population? And like Jeze mentioned a few minutes ago, a lot of them get to experience a lot of traumatic events throughout their childhood, and that translates to them facing some of the challenges that we start seeing in higher ed institutions. And so there has been research in the past that have found foster youth to have a high or report a high ACE scores. Again, from trends and statistics, we know that, for example, youth go through at least two traumatic events. One is being removed from their home, and then two, the abuse or neglect that got them removed in the first place.
Now, obviously, how does this look on campus is something that we need to look into. Many times we expect certain behaviors to have an explanation, or sometimes we don't look into why these behaviors have an explanation. And so it's important for us to have that trauma lens, put on every time we encounter our students, every time we, service our students, in order for us to try to understand the why of something. I think it's key for us to start changing that mentality from, what's wrong with you to what has happened to you. That information of there's a reason why these behaviors are here, and there's a reason why these behaviors have served a function in the past. Something that we will see in the classroom or on campus, the inability to focus for our students. We might see them disengage. We might see them not fully committed to a class or fully committed to coming and receiving services. That attrition rates that are quite high, for foster youth support programs. And many times it has to do with the way that they were raised, the way that, these ACEs have impacted their development, or that trauma that they are continuously reacting to in different situations. You'll see the higher levels of anxiety and stress. Now, it's true that tests, buying books, registering for classes, the college experience, as stressful as it is, and it's full of anxiety every single week, every single semester. Now, our students sometimes would react so much higher than the other population that might have less of this history. And so you might see some of our students overreacting over certain situations, or what might seem like an overreaction to us based on our experience and our background. But in reality, it's not. In reality, it's the norm of where they live. And so it's important for us to make sure that we realize whenever there's something that seems out of the norm or out of what we would normally be used to seeing, there might be a situation. And so identifying that student as they might be of a specific population or former foster youth, and trying to create that correct support system for them. The difficulty building relationships. I think you can see that from swinging from one side to the other, either attaching very fast to certain people. If you're a professor, if you're a staff that supported them and did something for them that day, then all of a sudden you become this hero. You become this person that is, wow, you're wonderful, you're the best ever. But then the next day you might be someone that is not able to bend something for them, and then all of a sudden, okay, that's it. I'm done with you. You're not listening to me. I have a reason. I have justifications of these things. And I think that's sometimes that difficulty of understanding that an excuse might explain the situation, but it doesn't justify it, and allowing that part to sink in is sometimes difficult for our youth. So building those relationships, that's why you might see someone jumping into a romantic relationship or a friend relationship very fast, and then breaking in and burning that bridge later on. You'll see with our students throughout the semester, they change sometimes a group of friends quite rapidly, cycling through them due to different issues. Mental health challenges. I think it's to expected that anyone that has been system impacted might have seen a therapist or a clinician at some point, sometimes required and mandated by whatever program that they were, involved in. And so many times our students, once they age out of that, once they become adults and have those rights to choose for their own medical rights, they don't want anything to do with having mental health therapy. They don't want to address these things. And so you'll see a lot of untreated mental health challenges that they are actively dealing with, and sometimes do not connect. They might just think, well, I had a bad week. That's why I didn't get up, this week. That's why I didn't come to school, because I was just feeling down, but it's okay. I slept it off and I'm fine. But when you look at those patterns that continues throughout the semester, that maybe has continued through a couple semesters, so that, gives the indication of something else deeper happening. And then finally, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Chime in and add to the mental health challenges. Even when we start looking across the board in regards to the types of research that there has been focused in identifying the specific barriers that they face while they're trying to attend college, one of the main ones that keeps coming across over and over again is that mental health, those mental health needs that they have.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up, Briseida. And finally, triggers. I think there might be certain things that are triggering for our students that we have not experienced. We all have different triggers. We all have different things. And for us to be mindful of some of those things. I remember a student of ours that, shared with us that one of the most difficult things for them in the classroom was when the door would open because of their experience, because of past traumatic events. Every single time, the person that would abuse them would open the door, they knew, okay, something's happening, something's going to happen to me. And so when, experiencing that for years, so now that opening the door would be a triggering event. And so something that this person would have to do is always sit in a position in the classroom that would always have their eyes on the door so they could see who was coming in or out. But they said, well, if so many people are coming in or out, there is a point where I just cannot focus, and either I shut down or I have to leave. So those are some of the things for us to keep in mind when servicing our students.
Yeah, and then Jeze, we do have some ones in the comment box the folks are sharing. We're definitely going to go over through them at the end of the presentation, correct?
Absolutely, yes. We'll definitely have some more of that response, because we definitely want to hear from everyone and the experience, and we obviously want to make sure that this is the experience that we've had, and this is some of the relationships that we've built, but we do not want to put this on everyone. Obviously, different people are going to have different perspectives, different things, and obviously there's going to be different data out there that is going to be able to support and help us build a better program in general. Now, one of the things that we want to make sure that we include is obviously the voice of our students. And every single thing that we do, if we are a program for our students, this voice has to be included. So for our presentation, obviously, we wanted to give the opportunity for our youth and our students to come in and show a little bit of their narrative and explain a little bit of their perspective of some of the things that have happened to them, and some of the things that they found useful within programs or within campuses. So for this portion, I would like to invite Davianna and Richard to come back and help us out in with some of these questions. So first, I will ask them to go ahead and give us a little bit of background about themselves, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the question portion. So I'll have Davianna answer. Sorry, Davianna, have Davianna answer, and then Richard will answer after that. Sorry, Davianna.
Hello again, my name is Davianna. A bit about myself. I'm 21 years old now. I entered the system when I was 15, and I was fortunate enough to stay with my siblings in the beginning. However, things change, and I ended up having to go to different homes and was even homeless for some time. But even before then, my home life wasn't the best. There were many things that I didn't understand because I was kept so sheltered. And so after I entered the system, I was made very aware about the realities of what was really going on in my life. And because of that, I had to deal with depression, anxiety, among other things that made me believe that it would be impossible for me to ever have a successful life. I felt as though the system kept failing me. There was so much going on and I wasn't being heard. It was very difficult and it took a very long time for me to find stability, and the journey was difficult to say the least. However, I was able to get the help that I needed to become the person I am today, which now allows me to do things like this where I can advocate for other and future foster youth.
Thank you very much, Davianna, for sharing that. Now, Richard, if you may tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Hello, my name is Richard. A little bit about me is that I was in the foster system total 3 times, started at the age of 5, and my last time being at 12 until I aged out and eventually became non-minor dependent. I was separated from my siblings various times until the last few years where I was completely on my own without any of them. A little bit more about me is my mother lost her parental rights over me and my educational rights. I was also moved around multiple foster homes, and eventually I entered a group home my last 4 years of care until I aged out. Although the system has many benefits that I utilize now, such as the medical and educational ones, one place that has failed me is that it made me very isolated, which caused me to have initially very poor social skills, since the only people I would talk to while in the system were social workers and therapists.
Thank you so much, Richard, for sharing that with us. Now, for the first question, what were some of the barriers you experienced at the start of your college journey?
So for me, when I began to apply for Mount SAC, I was actually homeless. So the huge barrier with that was that I didn't have access to a computer or Wi-Fi or even transportation. So it made it really difficult for me to get access in order to go to the orientations and interviews and things of that sort.
Thank you, Davianna. Now, Richard?
Some of the barriers I faced when I first started my journey in college and Mount SAC was lack of a support system. My semester at Mount SAC, I did not have anyone to take me to my first concert performance or explain to me that I was supposed to be there early to be there on the boat or anything of nature. And though this may seem small to others, for me, it was very discouraging and unmotivating, because in my head, if it wasn't important enough to anyone else and it didn't matter to anyone else, then why would it matter to me?
Thank you, Richard. Now, for the second question, can you give me 2 examples of the different resources that had a significant impact on your college journey?
The biggest impact for me was a support program like REACH, especially in the beginning. I didn't know anything, so having them walk with me step by step with things like financial aid, the workshops that I should be taking, and the many opportunities I have as a foster youth helped me so much. And also having access to book vouchers was really great. I was able to get the books that I needed almost immediately, rather than waiting to get the books and risking the chance of being left behind because I couldn't afford them.
Thank you so much, Davianna. And then Richard?
A couple of resources that significant impact on my college journey would be one, joining a support system like REACH, because there's people around me who are investing in me more than I was in myself, which really helped motivate me to show the same interest and the same level of care and support in myself as they're putting into me. A second resource that significantly impacted me was AmeriCorps. Since joining and working under AmeriCorps, this led me to work on campus, which eased my time as a student. This in hand also helped me improve my professional development skills, personal growth, and networking.
Thank you, Richard. And just to clarify, I cut a little bit off, but Richard mentioned TAE AmeriCorps as a program that he was part of. It's a branch of AmeriCorps specifically designed to provide job opportunities for foster youth here in California. And now for the final question. What were some of the things you were expected to know but never heard about before?
So when you apply for things like school, they asked me about documents I had never heard anything about. I didn't know what how to get a transcript or what a proof of dependency letter was. I didn't know about non-IRS filing letters or even what a social security number was. So when they asked me, and they even have these little question marks at the corner of the applications, and they didn't tell me what they were or where to get them. And it kind of just goes to show how they expect you to know everything that's on the application before even applying to them.
Thank you, Davianna. Richard?
Something I expected to know, but didn't, were many of the things you experience when submitting to college and college culture. For instance, for me, when I first had my first appointment, the counselor told me that I should check my email as I will be receiving multiple things from the school and professors and classes to do there. I interpret that as my email I used to register to sign up for classes in school, I will receive stuff from MPA, rather than MPA making an individualized email for me to use as a student there at MPA. And that just being one. Other things will be financial aid class drop lines, financial aid disbursements, or a couple other things that I expect to know but didn't know.
So I know Richard is cutting off a little bit. So some of the things he said were that he definitely had troubles with the campus culture and understanding it. There was a specific situation in which he went to financial aid and they told them, you're going to receive it on your Mount SAC email, any information of what the next steps are for financial aid and all those steps. So he assumed that through his personal email, he was going to get an email from Mount SAC and continuous emails to make sure that, they would keep him, in the loop. What he didn't understand was that actually each Mount SAC student gets their own Mount SAC email, and that's where they receive that information. So, those were some of the things that he said that as part of the campus culture that he was expected to know, but he obviously did not know when starting Mount SAC. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much to Richard and Davianna for sharing this, your perspective. For any program, for everything, the perspective of the students is the most important part. It's what we should be basing off our program. Our implementations are our, basically our interventions or anything that we create for them. So go ahead and share my screen again. So moving on to unintentional institutional barriers. Now, as I go over this graph that we created, or this workflow, I ask you to think about your institution, whether it's higher education, whether it's nonprofit, wherever it may be, and think about the different loops that sometimes we turn our youth or our students into. Now, this comes as a great intention. Everything that we try to do is to obviously provide support and to make sure that we are there for them. However, at times we create these unintentional barriers that we cannot realize at that moment. So for starters, here at Mount San Antonio College, we have a college application whenever coming in. So obviously every application, has to be completed and processed. Now we are a 2-year college, which means that we accept pretty much everyone that applies. There is a registration process. So that in itself makes it so much easier compared to if we were a 4-year institution that had obviously a much stringent path for acceptance. But let's say a new student applies to college, then they will have their, they have to complete financial aid, they have to complete registration to enroll in, and get everything done. So financial aid, you might have, the Chafee educational training voucher that is a specific financial aid for foster youth. You will have to complete the FAFSA, which is obviously the federal financial aid application. Now, if you get picked up for verification, there's going to be additional documents that you have to turn in for that. You have to maybe turn in dependency if you said that you were a former foster youth. You might have to turn in proof of income if you said that you filed or not filed, depending on how those things are. For registration, you're going to have to complete an orientation for the college. You might have to complete a placement assessment, whether that is a questionnaire, whether that is bringing your transcript from high school or taking a test. And then residency, obviously we have to determine if you're a resident, in-state resident or non-state resident, for tuition purposes. So sometimes some of our students, depending on what they put on the application, they might be, flagged as non-resident, which means there's an additional layer of documents that need to be provided, for us to complete that. Now, for any foster youth that comes onto our campus, we would obviously ask them and tell them, advise them, join a support program, join EOPS or EOP, or join the foster youth support program, REACH, in our case. So each of those also have their own application, also have their own orientation, and then obviously whatever document and requirements that follow after that. So all of this is just for a brand new student that has no experience dealing with college yet, or the campus culture, as Richard pointed out. And then second, this is also before we even take classes, okay? We haven't even met with a counselor. We haven't looked at majors. We haven't looked at anything academic. This is just simply the process to get them started. And then this is also not taking into account what's happening at home, if they have a job, if they have income, if they have emotional support. All those things are outside. So whatever issue, whatever barrier, whatever difficulty they have outside of this, they have to deal with, and then come and deal with these things. Now, all of these things are necessary. All these things are very helpful. EOPS and joining a foster support program could be the difference of, staying in college or graduating or being successful. But, nonetheless, those create additional steps in which each of them can be a potential place for our students to simply just give up and say, you know what, this is too difficult. This is just too much. Or is it really worth it? At this point, we also have to notice that they don't know what the services might be, or even if they know those services, they still don't know the true value that a book voucher is, the true value of having prior to registration, the true value of having access to a counselor or any of these resources. And so for them, at this point, it might not be worth it if too many of these steps are becoming complicated. Now, what have we done to support our community and to support our foster youth? The first thing, we created a holistic support services, a wraparound approach. It's true that we are a campus support program, and meaning that we want them to do well educationally. We want them to do well academically. We want them to graduate, transfer, whatever their educational goal may be. However, in order for that to happen, we have to step back and look at what are the things outside, what that might prevent you to be successful before you even step foot on campus. Do you have a job? Do you have income? Do you have emotional support, a support system around you to be there with you when something happens? Do you have stable housing? If those are not being met, then we cannot worry too much about tutoring, about book vouchers, about having counselor appointments, because there's other things that are more important for me, like knowing where I'm going to sleep tonight or next week, than that tutoring services. So something that we have done is we created a position. We created a position as a life skills coordinator. And this person, what they do is they first assess every single student that comes in to see what are the issues or what are some of the deficiencies that they have when it comes to their life skills. Is their housing secure? Do they know, do they have a job? Do they know how to budget? Do they know how to self-sustain when it comes to grocery shopping? Can they make ends meet with the income that they do have or don't have? And so then depending on that, we create a series of workshops throughout the whole year for them to hopefully increase some of those knowledges. And then depending on that, we might refer out, of course, if some of these things are not for us to address. For example, we're not going to address any mental health challenge. We're going to refer it to the experts when it comes to that. But that allows us to create those services around a student that can support them. A trauma-informed care programming, every single thing that we do, we need to make sure that we have that from the language that we use. We need to start, using certain things as a support program instead of support system, instead of family, because we know not everyone will have, those roles. We, as I mentioned earlier, we need to make sure that we have that mindset change of what is wrong with you, what has happened to you. And some of those things that we have done is through our faculty trainings, through our trainings for our classified and direct, contact staff, to understand some of these things and understand at least the basics of what happens, the triggers, the trauma-informed, thought process that you need to do whenever talking to someone. And then that also allows them to identify that, that use and maybe provide the adequate resource. Mentorship, the peer-to-peer is crucial. I think the most important part and component of our program is the fact that we hire former foster youths that have been on our campus 1 or 2 years already and are usually within 1 year of transferring to become peers to the new generation. So each of them have a caseload of about 15 students that they are responsible for the whole year. And so that they must meet them in face, in person at least once a month. They must have contact with them at least once a week. They are the ones that are the first point of contact for our youth. Our youth might not have that comfort to come and speak to the other staff at first, but they will have an easier time coming in contact with one of their peers. And the key thing is that we're asking our peer mentors to simply teach them about the mistakes that they themselves made and how did they learn these things and what were the lessons that they made. And obviously there's a lot of training that is involved in that part that we're going to mention a little bit down the line, of how do we prepare these students, because we want to make sure that we take care of them emotionally as well, so that they don't feel burdened and they don't suffer any of the vicarious trauma that can happen to any one of us. Growth opportunities versus punitive responses. Every opportunity is a learning opportunity. A mistake is a challenge, but it's also that opportunity to make some true change. So, an example is whenever someone comes in late, or we, to an appointment, if there maybe, there's 20 minutes left of that time, maybe spend those 20 minutes speaking to them about what went wrong or how can you prevent yourself from being late next time. What were some of the things that you can do? Instead of saying like, nope, I'm sorry, you can, you have to leave, come back, next week or make an appointment and then be here on time. I think it's important that we show our students that, we're there for them, but we also have to hold them accountable to their things. We also have to make sure that, we tell them the truth, but give them that opportunity for them to perform better. Give them that opportunity and those tools for them to learn from that instead of just, being on the negative side. We have to remember that students and youth in the that have experienced time in the system, they've had several people telling them about what they did wrong. So if if they skip school one day, they're going to have their lawyer tell them, they're going to have their case manager, they're going to have their social worker, they might have their therapist, even they might have whomever is on their case. So you're going to have 5 or 6 people bringing this punitive response to something that might simply be normal behavior according to the development and according to the age. Something that wouldn't happen for someone that lives with their bio parents, which they would normally have mom and dad to tell them about that, and then that's it. So we need to make sure that we take that approach of, okay, how can I help you learn from that opportunity? We want to make sure that we build trust and empower, be consistent and strength-based. It's okay to be tough. It's okay to have these very specific rules as long as you're consistent. I know that there's, certain programs that would tell them, if you're more than 15 minutes late, then you can't come to that appointment. I think, that's obviously something that can happen as long as you always hold to that. As long as one, you're giving them that 15-minute grace period, I think is more than plenty for them to show up and have that, approach. However, you need to make sure that you hold to that, because the more consistent you are every single time they come, okay, if I do A, you said that you're going to be there for B. And if every time I have A, you're always there for B, then great, then that trust will start building. But if you start switching around, if you start being inconsistent, if you're the one canceling the appointments, if you're doing all these things, then that's going to be very difficult for them to find that trust and build that moment. And empower, you want to start with what they're doing well. I think, it's important for us to look at, okay, maybe we have a student that always shows up late to appointments, but this student still, shows up and still there. That is very different than if they just stop showing up. I remember a specific situation with one of our students that is who would be one of the ones that would participate the most with us. However, they would tend to drop in the middle of the semester and then disappear and then come back next semester. There was one particular semester in which I found him about a week after, grades were due, and he had just found out that he had failed his math class. And so he's in tears and he's telling me like, I tried really hard. I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't believe it. Like, all these things. He was definitely having such a hard moment. And so I listened to him But then as soon as, he was done venting, I said, well, before anything, I want to tell you how proud I am of you. Last semester, you would drop and just not show up for 6-8 weeks, and we did not hear from you until next semester. But here you are today, crying and upset because you did not pass a class, because you thought that you could do better, because there's so many other things, because you tried. And I know it's an F, but I really want to tell you that you earned this F, okay? And it's, which I know sounds weird, but it is something that you have earned. And so this puts you at so much of a closer chance of passing the next time, because you're starting to get that discipline right. And I think looking at what they have done correct, instead of always focusing on this other thing and that strengths that they already have, and our foster youth are one of the most resilient and strong people that we will encounter because of everything that they will overcome. So the fact that they have stepped foot on campus, on a higher education campus, regardless of everything else that has happened, is something to be celebrated. Mental health resources. We definitely want to make sure that we have things available for them. We mentioned that they had challenges. So something that we have done on our campus is, yes, we do have a couple clinicians available for our students, but we have a campus about close to 30,000 students. So 2 or 3 clinicians will not be enough for that amount of students. So what we've done is we partnered with local nonprofits. We've created MOUs in order for them to be able to see our students and for us to refer to them, obviously with the permission of the student. And this has definitely worked out well, because some of our students prefer to keep these types of services off campus. Nothing to do with us. So we find out nothing about it. They just like to take care about their personal life outside. Also, it allows us to be readily available for these services and refer to them, and also a long and consistent service for as long as they want to do. While campus resources sometimes allow them to take 5 or 6 sessions, these services with the companies that we have created an alliance with are continuous, and it's up to the student to follow through for as little or as long as that they want. Accountability. We need to make sure that we help them hold themselves accountable to something. We have the saying in our program that at first when they come in, they're accountable to us. We are the ones that they don't want to let down, because we're reminding them about things, because we're hounding them to things in certain perspectives from them. But we're there all the time. But eventually it starts hopefully to click that, oh no, wait, I go to class because I know that it's good for me, because I know that it actually is putting me closer to my educational goal, instead of doing it because Jeze or Briseida or Richard or Davianna or someone from Reach is telling me about it. And so we need to make sure that we teach them and do that switch of, okay, it's okay for you to have an excuse for something, but that excuse can only take you so long. An excuse explains the behavior, but it doesn't justify it. And so if your car broke down, today and you're late for something, then that's okay, that's understandable. But if your car breaks down every single week or a couple times a week, then maybe it's time for a different car, or maybe it's time for a bus or other options. Because we need to make sure that we empower them to realize there are certain decisions that you have to be accountable for, but you do have the power to change it.
Yeah, and then if I can add to that, Jeze, I think there's a difference between doing things with them rather than versus doing things for them, right? And so oftentimes we can ourselves create situations in where we want something so much for them that we'll, schedule the appointment for them to see a counselor, or perhaps the liaison, or perhaps their caseworker wants to meet with one of us and whatnot. And so we have to be very mindful, right, of the student and take into perspective of what they want. And so accountability comes into play in regards to allowing them to have the opportunity to do these things for themselves, but, also being along with them, right, supporting them every step of the way.
Absolutely. It's a partnership. We cannot work harder for them than they do for themselves. A step-by-step process, explain the how and the why. I think so many times what we do is second nature to us. If we work in higher education, we know how the financial aid process works. We know how adding a class works. We know how the calendar works. Well, for our students, sometimes that doesn't happen. And so we need to make sure that we have that understanding and that respect towards them, that we cannot expect them to understand in 30 seconds something that has taken us years to master. And so we need to have that grace for that process and break it down into easy steps. So we might tell a student, okay, we'll go onto your FAFSA and then change X, Y, and Z, submit it, and make sure that, come back and check with financial aid in a couple weeks. We haven't checked to see if they have a laptop or a computer for them to access. We haven't checked in to see if they have adequate internet access, if they know the web page for them to access to, FAFSA. So there's so many of other steps that sometimes we need to make sure that we account for and help them build that thing. And as we learn, not just the how, but the why. Why is this important? Why is, a March 2nd deadline for a FAFSA important? Why are you supposed to do these things? Why is it important for you to show up to every class on time and be there ready to learn, and whatever that may mean? It's important for us to respect them as adults intellectually and explain the rationale that we know, and that will hopefully help them build more accountability and also empower them to make some of these decisions on their own.
Yeah, and if I can add to that as well, like we have to be very mindful, especially for folks who are perhaps haven't had the opportunity to work with foster youth in the past, that foster youth are considered an at-risk student population, meaning they're more likely than their counter peers who do have that parental support, who do have extended family support, to drop out, right? To not persist, to not continue achieving their higher education goals. And so they are a subgroup within the first generation college student population, meaning when they get to college, it is completely foreign to them. They're not aware of what the different departments are. They do not know how to, do certain things. And so it's really important to incorporate that explanation behind some of the things that we expect them to do automatically, right, by default. But being mindful of that, right, can definitely help in assisting our foster youth once they continue, attending higher education.
Thank you very much, Briseida, for adding that. That's extremely true. Now, how we built the support system for our youth. First, we identified who the foster youth on our campus were. We made sure that we looked into the data, and make sure that what were the ways for us to know who we're servicing and how they're doing. Something that we've done within our, database is we created attributes for anyone that self-identified themselves as foster youth and anyone that has been verified as a foster youth. So that when everyone reports, we understand, okay, this is self-identified as a potential foster youth, but then this code tells us that this person has been verified and therefore they are a foster youth. We created an advisory council with local stakeholders. If we're servicing the community, which we are, we need to make sure that the community has an input, not just our campus community, but our students, our potential students, our high school principals, our high school liaisons, our nonprofits, our Department of Education. Anyone that has a direct line with some of our students can tell us, hey, then, next year, this is what they're looking for, or this is what comes, you should be expecting a group that maybe lives more in unstable housing because of X, Y, and Z. And so, maybe providing more information on housing and at your next presentation is probably better for this group. So making sure that this group provides that oversight for the program to make sure that we have the ear to the ground and can mimic those trends and meet them accordingly through our program. The case management approach with our peer-to-peer mentoring, as we mentioned, we give a caseload to our students. These students then, are obviously our peer mentors are tasked to keep in the loop with these students and provide these services, give resources, but then we also provide that training to them. Once a week, we have trainings for them in various things. We have taught them some very basic things of how to answer a phone, to how to write a correct email, to maybe even how to ask open-ended questions, how to do those motivational interview questions, and then how to log this thing, how to create those notes. And then we do case consultation once a week too. We come in everyone as a group, and then we bring out, like, are there any concerns? Or there's something that's going on? And then we have the community, our program community come back and say, okay, well, maybe this is how we can do this to address that. The intrusive services, we need to make sure that we are there all the time for them. So our students, they receive a lot of emails, they receive a lot of information from us, even text messages or so on. We have a newsletter that goes out that is created through MailChimp, and so whenever a student clicks in on something, we know what time did they click on that, what time were they looking at that, and then what were the things that they clicked on, how interested were they in that, and then those would be some of the things that we need to do more of. Diversified delivery of our services. It's not enough just to have a phone line. It's not enough to have an email, but you need to have other options for them to be able to communicate with you. In our program, we obviously have, yes, we have a phone line. We have a couple phone lines. We have a text line. We have a chatting service that they can log in. We have a web, a form where they can ask questions. We also have a virtual front desk Monday through Thursday in which a student can just log in and ask for questions. And obviously, all of our emails are out there for them to be able to, contact us at any point. But then we're also in the process of creating a frequently asked questions section on our website that can have some of those responses for our students at any time that they join in. So if they have a question, they put down the Fortnite at 1 a.m. They're like, oh, it wasn't drop date next week or something. Well, maybe I can go on the reach frequently asked questions and then get that answer, even though staff are not on the clock at that point. Creating videos that are embedded within the website. All those things can diversify the platforms that we deliver service to. Centering of different voices. Oh, sorry. Yes.
If I could just add to the intrusive services, it is really important to be mindful that foster youth students do have or do need that intense high care. However, there's a difference between cuddling or holding by the hand versus checking in with them, right? Versus knowing what are some of the things that they're going through, perhaps wanting to connect with them and letting them know that you're there to support, right? And so I just wanted to mention that because oftentimes that creates all the difference between a student wanting to come back or not, right? Knowing that there is someone who is mindful of them and who does care, right, in regards to their higher education goals and things like that.
Yes, and then finally, centering student services, student voices. You need to make sure that you create avenues for students to present their opinions and their feedback. We have pre and post tests after every event. We have a testimony that will be going live on their website in which students at any point during the semester, they can bring up their testimony, but also their input of what we need to be doing better. We need to make sure that we always have avenues for them to give us feedback throughout the semester, at the beginning and at the end. Centralized services, anything that can be done within your one-stop shop should be done within your one-stop shop. Anytime you can avoid sending a student on an errand to go somewhere else is a great tool, because then you might risk the chance of losing them on that process if you're sending them somewhere else. And if you do have to send them somewhere else, then go with them or provide a very clear contact of who they are going there to talk to. And then finally, we started meeting youth in their own world. I think we are so used to our culture. We are so used to how we do things, even our education. And so many of our ideas come from there. But so what we needed to do is making sure that we started with simple question: how are you doing? Why are you here? Is this important to you? Who sent you, in a way? Because so many of them come because their social worker told them. So many of them came because their transitional housing is connected to these things. And so helping them decide why is it that you're here and how can we help you with that? Making sure that there's so many other things outside of campus that affect them, and making sure that we try to understand that part before we start giving advice, before we do anything else. Let's try to meet the person. Let's try to meet the youth of who they are and help them teach us, as they are the experts in themselves. And we have to make sure that we do not take for granted that contact that we have with them, whether they showed up for a meeting, they sent an email, picked up the phone, because we cannot guarantee that they're going to do that again. We cannot have that guarantee that they're going to be available. So if there's anything that you can do while you have that captive audience, you need to make sure that you make that count. You need to make sure that you do that. I always use this metaphor as in baseball. I'm from Los Angeles, so I'm a Dodgers fan, so I have a lot of experience losing, at a high level, obviously, in the World Series. And so I think about, if you're at the bottom of the ninth inning, it's already 2 outs, three balls, and you have 1 swing left, and swing away and make it count. So that's the way that we should look at every single time we encounter a foster youth, making sure that we do and give everything that we can for them, because we cannot guarantee that they're going to come back the next day. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us in this presentation. Here's our contact information, our email. Please feel free to contact us if there's any follow-up, anything that we can partner with. I think sharing information is fantastic. And at this point, we definitely want to make sure that we open it to questions.
So we want to thank Jeze, Briseida, Richard, and Davianna for a very good presentation. I think as educators, we are committing ourselves to making sure that we support all of our students, regardless of who they are or their backgrounds or what they've been through. So this was very helpful. There are a few questions, but before I go to the questions, I think there's a comment here from Daniela Green Welch that I totally agree with. And she says that in their work with aged out youth, we say to them, we will work hard with you, but we will not work harder than you. So they also have a responsibility to do the work.
Absolutely.
So one of the questions is about mentoring. So was that caseload 15 or 50 per peer mentor?
It's 15 per peer mentor.
15 per peer mentor.
Yes.
So the other question here is there a reason the abuse of prescription drugs is not included in question 8?
So in regards to that question, maybe I did not mention it, but the quiz that we did have everyone participate if they wanted to, and we pulled it from the Center for Disease Control website. It is a questionnaire that they used for the ACE study. And so if we remember correctly, it's only focusing on measuring 3 different areas, right? Which was negligence, household dysfunction, and abuse. And so perhaps maybe that's one of the reasons it was not included in there, because it's not measuring other different types of ACEs.
Mm-hmm. So the other question is, how do you get students to participate? An attendee is asking, we do a lot of outreach, but participation numbers are very low.
I think, the first thing that we have to do, especially, in virtual things, we have to be comfortable sometimes with some of our participations to be low. So we definitely have had events in which, 3-4 students show up. And then we had events in which 19, 25 students show up. I think the biggest number we had once is we did have like 120 something students, for one big event that we had. So I think one of the things is you want to make sure that, the students, have that input on the type of event that you want to have and the delivery of the event. I think we have ourselves made certain mistakes in creating something that is very great, but great to our standards or great to the delivery method that we want, compared to what the students want and how they want it. I think something that we have done also is have our peer ambassadors or peer mentors help us with that outreach and do that invite for the students. I think it's very different if I say, hey, I'm going to be there, no one cares. Students don't care if I'm going to be there to do that. But if one of the people that they have a contact with, that they have a relationship with, if they say, hey, I'm going to be there, come with me, then that is actually very powerful. And so utilizing them for that personal outreach, personal invitation is more important even than sending a flyer or creating these beautiful newsletters that go out to students.
And then if I can just add to that comment also, or to the question in regards to how do we get students to even participate in events like these, right? And sharing their story and things like that. I think one of the important things is right off the bat is having that relationship with them, right? Getting to know the student, getting to know who they are, what their interests are, right? So then you start analyzing like, okay, this student perhaps will enjoy this opportunity, right? They can greatly benefit from developing certain areas, right? Throughout their time here with us. And so I think one of the greatest things we can do as, me being a former foster youth myself, is someone kind of realizing that I do have a space and that I can give back to my community and that I've made it to somewhere where I can participate in things like this, right? As Davianna mentioned, like now she's in a position in where she can come in and be able to participate and advocate for other foster youth.
So we have 2 more questions before we wrap up. Carrie Holt is asking, what evaluation are you using to determine level of life skills?
So I am the life skills specialist. So I specifically created an assessment that students that are first year students take at the very beginning when they first join our program. And that allows me to analyze the different areas that they need help, right, or that I may start looking into, right, so that I can assist them. And so some of the areas that the assessment focuses is in analyzing, right, which looking at research, we can see that students have a lack of knowledge in regards to just really basic independent life skills, such as financial literacy, healthy relationships, nutrition, and whatnot. And so through that assessment, I am able to provide the support services that they need. Now, in regards to my, giving you a little bit more of background, right? Once the students take that assessment, then there's a curriculum, right, that I also created in regards to students who need assistance in these different areas, how I'm going to approach that. And so, for example, financial literacy, we go over credit fundamentals, as well as how do you create a budget. And I think it's really, really important that when we are having these meetings and these conversations with our students, we don't just tell them, but we involve them in the process, as well as making it, if you can, hands-on, so we can create that lived, that active, active learning experience for them, so that when they walk away, then they can, remember some of the things that we talked about during our meetings.
So our final question here is, what is your funding source for extended foster care student services? That's from Renee Day.
So we have several funding sources. So our main funding source in the state of California, there's what's called student equity funds that are given to community colleges for specific populations, foster youth being one. And so we've received most of our funding for that. My salary, the salary of our program specialist, salary of so many of our hourlies comes from that. However, we also, through our resource allocation for our campus, we requested additional funding from our general funds. And so we receive a portion of money yearly from our general funds. But then in order for us to grow and continue growing, what we have done is actively looking for different grant opportunities, specifically for this population. So since we have been around, we have received 4 different grants to support youth, obviously depending on different projects. So for example, creating cohorts and caseloads came from a, from a project. Creating a life skills specialist came from a grant. These different things that first we try it out for the grant for a year, and then we go back to our institution and say, hey, this is the data that we had, this is the impact that we've had, comparing the students that participated in it compared to the students that did not participate in it. And we have been successful a couple times in receiving backing from our institution to keep on funding some of these events.
Well, thank you so much, Jeze, Briseida, Richard, and Davianna from Mount San Antonio College in Walnut, California. Please reach out to them. You see that they have posted their contact information on the screen. If you want to start a similar program, or if you have any questions about this webinar, please reach out to them. Thank you so very much, our attendees, our panelists. I also want to thank our NCORE team for putting this together. There's a lot that happens behind the scenes for this to happen. I also want to thank the Sorenson team for providing our interpreters and cross-captioning. Thank you so very much. This is Dr. Jenny Rongo here at the Southwest Center for Human Relations Studies and NCORE office. Thank you so very much. If you want to sponsor a webinar, you can reach out to us at ncore.ou.edu. Let us know what ideas you have. We love supporting emerging scholars like we had today. And emerging scholars webinars are free. So reach out to us, let's have a conversation and join us next time. Thank you so very much.